Hello everyone and welcome back to Closet's Gaming News, especially when it's positive, whether it's a new cool piece of tech, whether it's a new awesome looking game that's been announced. Sadly, part of reporting the news is also talking about negative stuff, and whether I like it or not, I have to do this. And the topic for today is the toxicity at NetherRealm, the studios behind the Mortal Kombat games. And yeah, let's just go directly into this. So this is coming from an article published by Variety magazine by Liz Lanier. And it's a really long article. Just look, this is a quick stroll of going through the article. You can see it's really long. So we will not read everything because otherwise we would be here for an hour. But essentially, it can be divided into three separate parts. The first part is about the crunch, about a period where the game is being finished and employees are being forced to work absurd amounts of hours. The second part is about allegedly sexist behaviors in the company. And the last part is about allegedly mistreating the employees that are contractors for NetherRealm. And yes, I'm saying allegedly because there were no real factual statements made by any court or something like that. But I'm actually going to side probably with Variety on this one, because from what I read, and I read the article fully, it actually seems that NetherRealm is an awful place to work at. So, let's start. Mortal Kombat 11 game devs allege toxic world condition at Warner Bros. Interactive's NetherRealm. A toxic workplace and 100-hour workweeks marred production at Warner Bros. Interactive NetherRealm during the creation of its recent Mortal Kombat 11, as well as previous titles in the popular fighting game, multiple sources tell Variety. The studio says it's now investigating those issues following Variety's inquiries. So yeah, before we talk more and read more of this article, let's say one thing. Crunch is a well-known issue in the game industry, and it's an issue that needs to get solved as soon as possible. It will doubtfully ever get solved completely. There will always be some degree of crunch time because that's just the way developing new products is, especially when you have a date when you plan to publish it, you announce that date publicly, and well, sometimes work just gets behind, and then it needs to be sort of recouped. Obviously, under ideal circumstances, you could just push the publishing of the game a little bit further down the line, make sure all the issues have been solved, but sadly, that's often not really an option, because the public outrage of just postponing a game's release by like 2 months, nowadays, it could really crush a game. Though I'm sure there are plenty of gamers who would say, you know what, I'm willing to wait a month, 2, or perhaps even more to make sure the game is recently in a quality state. But I doubt that many people would also be willing to say, I'm willing to do the same thing to ensure that the employees are being treated well. Most of the people buying the games don't really care about how the developers are being treated. They don't honestly care about it at all because it's just not something that comes to their mind. Yes, it's becoming more and more of an issue, so more and more gamers are actually becoming aware of the problems that come with crunch time. So hopefully over time we will get more studios that behave ethically and actually treat their employees well. But that may actually come with less studios announcing release dates for their games, because they will just want to make sure that we can release it once it's ready. And that is what we will probably hear as a solution for this. Okay, but continuing on with the article. Reports of low pay and the crunch of extreme overtime as workers try to finish the game on time initially surfaced about NetherRealm Studio on social media earlier in April, but those issues appear to be symptomatic of a long-term poisonous work culture at the studio, according to 7 people who spoke to Variety, 5 of whom asked that their names not be used for fear of reprisals. And yeah, that's a legitimate concern. Whenever you say that your work environment is toxic, there's a good chance you might actually get reprimanded, and I completely understand their issues. The sources, a mix of current and former full-time employees and contractors, talked of gender discrimination and loud, obnoxious, super toxic co-workers. The common thread among all the sources was they felt the pressure to work long hours came with the threat of being replaced or denied a chance at more desirable position or better pay. And yeah, that's something I fear probably happens at a lot of big studios because everybody wants to work at these. Just having the fact that you worked in one of these studios in your CV is something that can very easily bring you a position at another smaller studio in the future, or make it easier for you to start your own studio because, okay, you see, I worked on this and this and this and this and this game at this and this and this big studio that have been successful. So you can trust me with investing your money into me is something that will very, very often probably happen. The sources, a mix of current and former full-time employees and contractors, talked of gender discrimination. Sorry, I already read that part. NetherRealm Studios responded to the complaints raised by the former employees and contractors in a statement to Variety. At NetherRealm Studios, we greatly appreciate and respect all of our employees and prioritize creating a positive work experience. As an equal opportunity employer, we encourage diversity and constantly take steps to reduce crunch time for our employees. We are actively looking into all allegations as we take these matters very seriously and are always working to improve our company environment. There are confidential ways for employees to raise any concerns or issues. So I'm just going to call bullshit. From what I read, truly the environment at NetherRealm is just awful. And it's really hard to say otherwise from all that's going to be said further down the line. One current employee said that he and others at the studio have been working 60 to 70 hours per week, 7 days a week since January. While he said various factors are to blame for the crunch, such as poor communication and mismanagement, he cited a January marketing event for Mortal Kombat 11 called Mortal Kombat Day, which put the studio behind significantly. Everybody said from the get-go, no, this isn't going to impact any development time at all. We should be fine. We'll use the content we have now, the employee recalled. Little did our creative director, our publishing team, and marketing know that we were already about 3 months behind on the entire game. So yeah, this seems to be quite an issue of miscommunication between the different teams, and that is something that needs to be solved because it only makes the issues worse altogether. So they had to pull everybody off, set everybody back another month and a half so we could make ourselves look good for Mortal Kombat Day, he continued. So that setback design, that setback quality assurance, programming, animation, mostly every department had to start playing catch-up. The catch-up still persists even though Mortal Kombat 11 was released on April 23rd. Problems with in-game currency and exploits have the studio working on its 3rd patch to fix glitches, and it already has 2 more patches planned. So yeah, the fact that studio has been essentially in crunch mode for 4 months is insane. And working 60 to 70 hours, if you've never done that, I can tell you, it's bloody awful. You just feel like you're tired all the time. It's almost like you're depressed at that time. And it's all just to being overworked. I never had to overwork myself for 4 months. I think the longest period was something like 2 weeks of working, probably 70-hour work weeks, 7 days a week. And I can tell you, when it ended, I was so glad. Like, I just wished that I could sleep for 24 hours. And, well, once that point came, I think I slept for like 18 hours in a row. I think they walked a fine line really well, he said. So it's a lot of implying, not up front. They don't tell us you have to work these hours. They also don't tell that to any of the temporary contract employees. When we interviewed all of our contractor/temporary employees, my direct manager will tell them overtime isn't mandatory, but everyone is expected to do their fair share. Meaning that when we have it, because even before we started interviewing and building up our temporary team, we already knew there's going to come a point where we're going to start crunching because we've been doing this since time immemorial on every project. And as I said, crunch time is something that's going to happen in the industry. It's just because of the way releases are sort of created, that it's just going to happen. There's going to be a period when crunch time is a thing. The question is how much crunch time is going to be a thing and whether there are ways to avoid it. Some full-timers have taken to living at a studio when working the most intense periods of crunch, he said, sleeping in their office or on an inflatable sofa in their cubicle. One employee has even been spotted wearing a bathrobe while in the studio. One source said that for some of the temporary positions, it's easy enough to replace those who don't crunch with a new batch of eager contractors. Many temporary employees are recruited from DePaul University, the person said, and our students who are willing to work a 9-month contract for $14 an hour in exchange for the chance to work on a AAA franchise. And that is certainly true. There will always be people who will be willing to take on this work that is badly paid, that is overworking you heavily, just to get that chance. But companies also need to learn that abusing their position of power is something that they need to avoid. Otherwise, gamers will not be pleased with them. This isn't something where I think the state should step in. This is something where we gamers should step in and say, if you are going to be a bad employer, we are not going to buy games from you. It's the same thing as when you, let's say, walk into a coffee shop and you see the manager yelling at the employee. You should probably walk out if you don't like that behavior. It's not something that should be done by the state. It's something that should be done on an individual level. He blamed various project shortcomings on poor planning. If we had more time or if there was actual project management, we could have had to be scrambling at the last moment for all these fixes and changes because all the S word broke at the last minute, he said. It's like the tree is a problem and the roots are all the causes. The problem began long before Mortal Kombat 11. The employee described a tense situation with Injustice 2 before its launch back in 2017 when a leak occurred. Attempting to identify the leak, all the temporary workers were pulled into the motion capture room, and NetherRealm Studio had Sean Himmerich laid into them, according to the employee. And when they went in there, they closed the doors, and our senior director, he started shouting at them, telling them, "We know the leak came from inside the studio. We're going to investigate it. Somebody here, and that person is going to get everybody here in trouble," and a lot of other stuff, and blah, blah, blah. And so that scared everybody S-less. That pissed people off, and it caused everybody to have all sorts of emotions. And in the end, it turned out that the leak actually didn't come from inside, but from outside the studio. And if there is a boss who starts yelling at you for something you didn't do, he's a bad boss. That's the moment you should just leave that position. And I know sometimes it's not that easy that you should just leave. You need the money, You have to pay rent, you have to buy food, I understand. But at the very least, that's the point where you should just start looking for a new job and quit as soon as you get that job. So, this is essentially about the crunch. The crunch is a problem in the industry, we know it. And it needs to get addressed. I don't know how to address it. Otherwise, then studios not really giving a clear release date and just saying we'll release the game when it's ready, and thus allowing the developers to actually work on it. On the other hand, I've seen projects who sort of went for this attempt and the game just got postponed, not like few weeks, not like few months, but years. And in the end, it just caused the game to become vaporware, and if it even eventually got released, it was so technologically behind and even mechanically that the game just wasn't a success. So having a release date is something that games sort of need to have to a degree. But maybe instead of saying we'll release the game on, I don't know, the 1st of April, say we're going to release it in Q2 of that and that year, giving you a few months to actually work with, instead of everybody just looking for that day, and if you don't release at that day exactly, people just being angry. I really think that's the only real solution, but again, I'm not a developer, I'm not a CEO of a company, I'm not a manager, so maybe I'm just being naive here. Moving on into the second part, which is pretty much about allegations of sexism. So this starts here. The mismanagement and toxic environment seem to be more keenly felt by female employees who shared experiences as far back as 2015. Former quality assurance analyst Rebecca Rothschild worked on Mortal Kombat 10 and Injustice 2 and explained that she had 90 to 100-hour work weeks on both titles. She left her job uncertain that she wanted to continue to work in the gaming industry despite not all of her experience being negative. At the same time, I have never been more aware of my gender and insignificance at a workplace, she told Variety. I left with scars and fear of an industry I am deeply passionate about. I don't like being a news story. I have nothing to gain from this professionally. I just want management to at least consider the other side and try to be better. And I'm not going to comment yet because there's more to be read here. Rothschild recounted to Variety her experience working at NetherRealm as a female developer. As far as being aware of my gender, it was a lot of things, she explained. The small amount of women working here. The even smaller amount of women who were full-time or had any kind of real influence. Being given a disgusting nickname I won't repeat by a set of co-workers I never spoke to. And yeah, disgusting nicknames are bad, and hopefully the HR department, when you come to them and say to them that this is going on, they actually do something about it. Another source stated that all of the women in the office were given nicknames by male developers. Sexist, transphobic, and generally toxic behavior was rampant, likely due to the fact that people were working 80 plus hours a week for months on end, and there was no accountability for such behavior, the former female employee told Variety via email. I heard from multiple people that a cabal of male developers had nicknames for all the women in the office, including Silver Fox, Database / Dyke Bitch, and Morph in reference to a trans employee. A co-worker once jokingly called Injustice mobile character who did bleeding overtime damage Time of the Month Wonder Woman in presence of two leads, and referring to women as B-words was commonplace. And yes, if this is true, it's truly awful. And because it's more than one person claiming this, I am actually on the side of believing this. And it just makes me sad. Gaming is a place that should be for everyone. And I truly mean that. And for the most part, I believe that the vast majority of gamers believe the same thing. I think most gamers don't really care whether they're playing with a guy, a girl, African American, Asian, a European, a Slavic person. We truly don't care as far as we can have fun playing with them. And the same should be said about the developer side of things. As long as you're having sort of fun, or at least a neutral experience working there, then it's fine. But if you have a bad one, that's sad and should be solved in one way or another. This mistreatment seemed to extend to women experienced trying to get raises or promotions while working at NetherRealm, according to Rothschild. I was on my third contract, and before I could even try and negotiate, I was told the hourly pay rate was non-negotiable, she said. I heard the same from a lot of women I worked with. However, I heard from men working on contract that they were able to negotiate and get higher rate. Same thing with promotions. The studio would create positions for specific people, all men. That meant no one else got a chance to interview or even hear about these positions. If you were adjacent to executive friend circles, which were mostly entirely male, you had a much better shot at job mobility. If not, you had to get real comfy because you weren't going anywhere. And this is actually a part where I'm going to disagree with this being about gender. Just the fact that she says this. If you were adjacent to executive friend circles, and even though those were entirely all male, it's all about this part. That isn't really sexism. That is nepotism. And nepotism is bad. I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying that people in positions of power should use those positions of power to get their friends into other positions of, even not power, just into other positions. This just seems to be an issue of nepotism rather than sexism, at least to me personally. This and other allegations in the story were shared with the studio, which declined to address the issues individually beyond its statement. Another source brought up similar issues concerning contractors, and this brings us into the third and longest part of this article, which is all about contractors. So I'm just going to read a little bit at the start and then give my final thoughts. At the time, she was a female programmer at NetherRealm, and she says it was the most difficult situation she'd ever experienced. I was a contractor which had a set rate regardless of discipline and treated like disposable, useless help, which is incredibly difficult to untangle from gender, she told Variety. Full-timers would consistently dangle the possibility of full-time employment in front of us as long as we were good enough as an incentive for us not to speak about issues and to crunch. So this, again, just doesn't really seem like an issue of sexism. This just, again, seems like an issue of just using power. And from other parts of this article, it seems that male contractors were subjected to some horrific treatment as well. It wasn't only females. So again, I don't think this is an issue of sexism. This just seems to be an issue of abusing contractors because, well, they're there for only a set period of time. You know they're going to leave, so you really don't care about what they're going to think. They're not going to be there, which I'm not saying is good. Just to clarify, I'm saying that's bad, but it's not an issue of gender. This is probably the part that shows to me that it really wasn't about gender. I think it was this one. No, it wasn't one. Let me find where it was. Where was it? Okay, here. So, a current employee, Variety spoke, explained the relations between employees and HR can be tense. HR isn't there for you, he told other employees and contractors. HR is there for the company. He described one situation in which a senior producer was being excluded from meetings and felt the environment was unprofessional and that he would get ignored or his opinion wasn't valued. So he went to HR to explain the situation and get some guidance. She told him, "Why don't you try caring less?" He said, "I don't know how that was supposed to help him." He said that he saw red and after that never talked to HR and any that again, except for when he really had to talk to her about regular job-related topics. So, from this part, you can see that this wasn't only about women; it was also men being treated bad. And the problem probably stems from the fact that contractors are really easy to get. There are so many of them who want to work at such a high profile high profile game as Mortal Kombat is because it just looks good on their CV in the future. And sadly, NetherRealm is seeming to use this as a way to abuse its people without really having any issues. Hopefully we will get this solved. Hopefully we will get to see people actually being better, and hopefully NetherRealm will get these issues solved. I don't know what exactly can be done about many of these issues because many of them are just actually systemic issues, but they don't stem from, in my opinion, sexism. I think mostly they stem from the fact that so many people want to work at the studio that they can legitimately just dismiss employees as disposable. And I don't know how to solve this, but I wish it will get solved. If you liked the video, consider pushing the button that says like. If you want to hear more of my opinions about gaming news, the occasional review, then be sure to subscribe. And if by any chance you didn't like the video, click the dislike button. It's not gonna offend me. See you guys later with more and hopefully more optimistic gaming content.